In a fiery showdown that shook the very walls of Congress, Jasmine Crockett confronted Rep. Jeff Van Drew with a ferocity that left the chamber in stunned silence, only to descend moments later into chaos. With her voice slicing through the political noise like a sharpened blade, Crockett didn't just call out Van Drew's remarks, she tore through them, accusing him of weaponizing antisemitism as a shield for political cowardice. What began as a routine hearing quickly spiraled into a historic confrontation, as Crockett's passionate defense of truth and integrity collided head-on with Van Drew's deflections and opportunism. This wasn't just another day in Washington, this was the moment the mask dropped, and the whole country watched. Now let's dive into the full story. And before we begin, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell, because moments like these are why we're here, bringing you the raw, unfiltered truth straight from the halls of power. The tension had already been simmering for hours in the committee room. The session was scheduled as a hearing on antisemitism, meant to shed light on the alarming rise in anti-Semitic incidents both domestically and abroad. Across the nation, Jewish communities have reported an increase in threats, vandalism, assaults, and hate speech, a horrifying trend that has shaken the conscience of many Americans. But instead of addressing this crisis with unity and compassion, Rep. Jeff Van Drew, a Republican from New Jersey known for his sharp shifts in loyalty and rhetoric, decided to weaponize the moment. He stood confidently behind the microphone and launched into a speech that was as politically charged as it was morally hollow. Rather than acknowledging the full breadth of anti-Semitic violence, including from neo-Nazi groups, right-wing extremists, and conspiracy theorists, Van Drew pivoted the conversation toward his usual targets: liberal voices, student protesters, progressive movements, and unnamed, left-wing ideologies. He accused them of fueling anti-Semitism while conveniently ignoring the far-right's historical and present-day contributions to it. Not a word was spoken about Charlottesville, the Tree of Life massacre, or the Proud Boys' involvement in spreading hate online and in the streets. Instead, Van Drew painted a picture that cast only his political opponents as the perpetrators, distorting the truth with the calculated precision of someone who wasn't looking for justice, but cover. As he wrapped up his monologue, sprinkled with generalizations and phrases like selective outrage and liberal hypocrisy, the room was thick with discomfort. Some members exchanged looks, others glanced down at their notes. Then Jasmine Crockett shifted forward in her seat. What happened next would echo far beyond the walls of the committee room. Crockett's voice, steady, assertive, and unrelenting, rose like a clarion call for honesty. "Mr. Van Drew," she began, locking eyes with him across the chamber, "you've just taken a hearing about real threats, real pain, and turned it into a partisan circus. You are not fighting anti-Semitism, you are hiding behind it." The impact of her words hit like a thunderclap. The silence that followed wasn't just awkward, it was electric. It was the silence that descends when someone finally speaks the truth out loud, without euphemism, without pretense. Van Drew blinked, visibly thrown off. He tried to smirk it away, perhaps assuming Crockett would stop there. She didn't. "You stood there," she said, her tone intensifying, "and used the suffering of Jewish Americans as a rhetorical weapon against your opponents. That's not advocacy. That's exploitation." Her words were sharp, clear, and grounded in conviction. "Do you think people don't notice what you're doing? You're using anti-Semitism not to fight hate, but to shield yourself from accountability and to silence others. And that, sir, is the most dangerous thing of all." Van Drew raised a hand as if to object, stammering something about focusing on where the danger is. But Crockett continued undeterred. "No. You don't get to pick and choose when anti-Semitism matters based on your political calendar. Anti-Semitism is not a left versus right issue. It's a sickness. And it's growing. And your attempt to divide this room for a soundbite is shameful." The tension in the room skyrocketed. Chairs creaked as members leaned forward. Journalists in the back began furiously typing. Every camera turned its gaze toward the unfolding confrontation. Crockett didn't just challenge Van Drew's narrative, she obliterated it. She reminded the room of the Tree of Life shooting in Pittsburgh, where a white supremacist gunned down 11 people simply for being Jewish. She referenced Charlottesville, where torch-wielding marchers chanted, "Jews will not replace us." She named Colleyville, Poway, and Monzi. She spoke of hate crimes committed by extremists radicalized by right-wing echo chambers and misinformation campaigns. She reminded everyone that real antisemitism doesn't come with a political label, it comes with death threats, broken glass, and bloodshed. What you're doing, she said, is pretending that hate is only real when it's politically useful. That's not just dishonest, it's dangerous. Because when you lie about where hate comes from, you let it grow. At that point, Van Drew attempted another interruption. I'm trying to point out that there's a bias in how we address these issues, he began. But Crockett cut in without missing a beat. The only bias here, she snapped, is the one that lets you ignore real victims because it's inconvenient to your narrative. As the exchange grew more intense, other members of Congress began trying to intervene. A few Republicans shouted for the chair to restore order. Some demanded that Crockett be reprimanded. But the momentum was hers, and she wasn't backing down. Even amidst the shouts and gavels, her voice remained clear. She turned back to the core issue, how the politicization of antisemitism was not only disingenuous but an insult to those who had suffered because of it. She challenged Van Drew directly. Why didn't you mention the synagogue attacks in Texas and California? Why didn't you talk about the armed white supremacists at rallies your colleagues attended? Why do you pretend that the only threat comes from students or activists protesting injustice? Is it because acknowledging hate from your own side makes it harder to score points? There was no answer. Van Drew, face tight with discomfort, avoided her gaze. Crockett continued, this time turning toward the chair and the full panel. This hearing should have been about solutions, about finding unity to protect Jewish lives, to confront bigotry wherever it hides. Instead, we're wasting time with political spin that only makes the problem worse. By now, the room had descended into chaos. Multiple voices competed for attention. Some tried to pivot the hearing back on track, but the clip of Crockett's takedown had already been clipped and uploaded online. Within the hour, it was trending across social media platforms. People praised her courage. Jewish leaders from both progressive and centrist organizations spoke out in support, saying her words reflected the urgency and honesty that the moment required. In the days that followed, the debate raged on. Right-wing pundits tried to paint Crockett as angry or combative, clinging to tired tropes in a desperate attempt to deflect from the substance of her argument. But for every smear, there was a tidal wave of support. Commentators, scholars, and survivors of anti-Semitic violence echoed her warnings. Hate can't be fought with half-truths. It must be confronted directly, with clarity and consistency. Jasmine Crockett, for her part, was unapologetic. In interviews, she doubled down. I didn't go to that hearing to make friends, she said. I went to speak truth. Because too many people are dying, too many communities are living in fear, and too many politicians are more interested in headlines than justice. Van Drew's team attempted damage control, issuing a lukewarm statement claiming he was merely highlighting blind spots. But the public wasn't buying it. His attempt to redirect the narrative was too transparent, too self-serving, too hollow. Meanwhile, Crockett's words were being replayed across networks, from CNN to independent podcasts. Her message had broken through the noise, and there was no walking it back. What made this moment so powerful wasn't just Crockett's command of facts or her refusal to be silenced. It was her moral clarity. She reminded the nation that anti-Semitism, like all hate, must be condemned without exception and without political calculation. She forced Congress, and by extension, the American people, to reckon with how often we allow convenience to determine our outrage. The confrontation also sparked a broader dialogue on Capitol Hill. A bipartisan coalition began drafting new proposals to more effectively monitor and respond to hate crimes, including language that ensured comprehensive definitions of anti-Semitism, racism, and religious bigotry. Some lawmakers even credited Crockett's remarks with reigniting the urgency of the issue, reminding them that silence was not an option. In classrooms, town halls, and religious institutions, her words were studied, dissected, applauded. For many, it was a defining moment, proof that political courage still exists, and that even in the most cynical environments, there are leaders who will stand up and say what others are too afraid to voice. Jasmine Crockett didn't just confront Jeff Van Drew that day, she confronted the entire culture of evasion and spin that has allowed hatred to grow unchecked. She exposed the hypocrisy of those who cherry-pick outrage for personal gain. She reminded us that if we are serious about justice, then we must be serious about truth. And so, What began as yet another hearing in Washington transformed into a watershed moment. One woman, armed only with truth and conviction, shattered the illusion that politics must always be polite and performative. She showed that sometimes, the only way to speak for the voiceless is to raise your voice, even if it shakes the room. If this powerful moment moved you, if you believe that truth should never be silenced and hate must always be confronted, then like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment where integrity stands its ground. Because in times like these, we don't just need politicians, we need truth tellers. And Jasmine Crockett has proven herself to be one of the most fearless voices in the fight for justice.